Hey everybody, welcome to DBS Films Podcast. My name is Kel. With me as always is my brother Brendan, and together we make movies with DBS Films. Today's episode, we are going over part one of how to successfully launch your indie movie. This is actually pretty good timing as we do have a new movie coming out March 31st, The Force of Death. So we basically wanted to go into a little bit of detail of everything you got to do to launch your indie movie to give you the best chance at success. As always, be sure to take a look at our Discord channel online. That is the place to be because we make movies for our fans, with our fans. So if you ever wanted to be part of the action and part of the fun, all you got to do is download Discord and join us there. So, hopping right in, really, this episode is kind of giving a lot of insight when it comes to actually launching your movie. And one thing that I think we've always said a lot, and I think is a good place to start, is this is something that's typically vastly overlooked by indie filmmakers. Usually what ends up happening is they have the three areas of filmmaking, which is pre-production, production, and post-production. Then they think, all right, it is done. I can pass off the baton, hand it to a distribution company or whatever it may be, and there we go. My hands are clean. When in reality, there is the fourth and often the most critical part of making a movie, which is marketing. And we say a lot of people almost stop running the race and start walking to the finish line when you really need to power through.
Yeah, it really blows my mind that you can sit here and invest $100,000, $200,000 in a movie and just expect it to get seen. I mean, even if you look at the Hollywood system, a lot of these movies have if it's a $10 million movie, usually it has a $10 million budget for marketing. Like, you have to push this stuff out. There's no guaranteed views. Nobody owes you to watch your movie. It doesn't matter how good it is. It doesn't matter how good of a movie you think you've made. You still have to put it in front of people and they have to decide to watch it. And it blows my mind to see so many indie filmmakers who spent 2-3 years working on a project, release it, and then they're just like, well, I don't feel like sharing it on Facebook, or I don't feel like sharing it on Instagram, or I don't feel like running Facebook ads, or I have no money left after going through this process. So I'm just going to get organic reach. And the people who do that, they'll make a movie for $100,000. They'll come down in the moat with us on all the other streaming platforms, and they make $200 a month. That's it. And unfortunately, you have to budget for marketing. You have to have a huge budget. You have to have all your ducks in a row because you only have a short amount of time. You have 48 to 72 hours to really get these algorithms cranking. And then you still have to market for about 30 to 60 days before you can kind of completely fall off. And then you can utilize more organic traffic at that point because the algorithm will work for you. But if you're expecting to go on one of these platforms and compete against hundreds of these other movies, some of which are very, very good movies, like we're competing. When we launched our last one, we were competing with Top Gun Maverick. We're going to be competing against The Menu. We're going to be competing against Megan for this upcoming launch. Like, if you're trying to tell me that I'm going to compete with those guys and they have a marketing budget and I'm supposed to get organic traffic when someone turns on Amazon Prime and they see Megan versus our stuff, they're going to click on Megan all the time. I have to go direct to the consumer. I have to make sure we have Facebook, we have Instagram, we have Google ads for people who like this movie, who are interested in horror movies, because that's our best way to succeed.
I mean, we're coming for you, Megan. Watch out, Jason. So it really is the case. Nowadays, the hardest part, and this is something that we've mentioned a lot and just kind of, frequently throughout the different episodes that we have, is no longer a quest of basically making the movie. It's getting the movie seen. Actually having that movie seen is a lot harder nowadays because you're competing against so many different mediums, whether it's YouTube, whether it's TikTok, whether it's other movies, whether it's those A-list movies that you were mentioning. There's just a lot that you have to compete against just to even get your movie seen. And a lot of the time, the indie filmmakers will do essentially nothing when it comes to their launch. So in this episode, we kind of want to go into the details of, how you can present yourself with the most successful launch that you possibly can do. I think the first thing, and this is what we always say, is you really got to start from the beginning. You got to make sure you have a very marketable title, marketable genre. I think the first thing I want to hop into is you can control what success is with your budget. And that's the biggest advantage that I think we have going into our launches. Our budgets are very, very condensed because we are very smart with how we spend our money when it comes to making the movie. Thus, the return that we need for it to be a successful movie is a lot easier than that 100, 200K. You know, we've often said 50 to a million, 50K to $1 million is almost like a real dead zone when it comes to making these movies. It's very hard to get the returns when you're in the moat with us in the sense of what you're able to generate. I think one of the best ways to have a successful launch of the movie is to set yourself up for a low goal to get your money back. You know, we always say the goal is get your money back so that you can make another one. If you do that, you are a successful filmmaker.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you have to control what you can control and focus on that. And what we can control is our budget. And that's what I focus on. I really make sure that we make these things for as cheap as possible. With each dollar that I spend, I'm going to try and allocate to an area that's going to make this movie look 100 times better or sound 100 times better or be 100 times better movie. Because my goal is to take a movie that we're making for under $50,000 and make it look just as good as a $5 million movie. It's very difficult, if not impossible, but each time we get better, we kind of get closer to that, $5 million Netflix look. And that's kind of your mindset that you have to be in. Because even if these movies launch and we have a community behind us and we're making sure that, everything is split tested, optimized perfectly, I still don't know whether this movie is going to do well or not. Some movies just take off and others just kind of flop. And if you get a flop and you spend $250,000, $500,000 on that, it could be the end of you. Like that could be the end of your movie career. And you might even have credit card debt and it's just not going to be good. So my philosophy is to make a whole bunch of other movies that I look at the ones that do really well, the Murder Houses, the Into the Forest. We're going to be remaking Girl in Cabin 13, and Murder House is actually going to get a 3.0 version this year. So we're taking the wins and we're scaling up on them because I know there's an audience for them. I know people like them. And then the ones that don't do as well, we just kind of cut away or we just take pieces from them, but change up the concept. If you're coming in here and, you're putting together, or you see it a lot in the indie community where they put a lot of money and effort and time behind a movie and it's just dead on arrival. And sometimes that stuff is very hard to predict. I've been doing this stuff for 15 years and it's extremely, extremely hard to just be like, hey, I know for sure this one's going to be a winner. And Shapeshifter's a 1.0 concept. I don't know if people are going to like it or not, but we did our best. We kept the budget down and we learned a lot from this movie. So if it doesn't work out as well, if it doesn't sell as well as the other movies, that's okay. We learned, we're still in the game. We have a good chance of making our money back and then we're on to the next one. And then if people really, really like Shapeshifter, well, then we can easily scale up, give it twice as much budget next time, add in more people from the Discord and make a better product because I know there's guaranteed money behind that because people like the Shapeshifter concept.
That's definitely something that I wanted to, highlight when it comes to The Haunting of the Murder House, which actually hit the #1 new releases on Amazon Prime until a little tiny fellow indie movie called Top Gun dethroned it. And I think, one of the reasons that we were confident in that launch was mainly because, hey, The Haunting of the Suicide House, which is the same story it was basically based on, was one of our more successful ones. Now, personally, it's one of my least favorite of our Hateful Eight movies, but that again shows you, if you had asked me as a person, oh, what do you think of this movie? I'd be like, oh, this is gonna be how are people gonna like this? That movie took off. It did a fantastic job, and it allowed us to have more confidence going into, the remake of The Haunting of the Murder House. And I think that, again, just goes back to, one, you control the budget, so you're setting yourself up for success. Two, the second thing that's really big is, this is where the whole genre comes into play. A launch of a specific type of movie is completely different than another type of genre. We talk about it all the time. We love indie. We're dabbling in found footage this entire year because of that built-in market as well, and also how easy it is to get through post, so we can make more movies. But I think one thing that, people really misunderestimate is, you can set yourself up for a much harder experience based on your genre and the type of movie. If you have an action, romance, or any of those comedy genres, and you do not have a face or a name or something like that, the algorithm is going to destroy you because the competition for those types of movies is whose face do you see on that cover that's very recognizable. So I think this is another thing to think of. Like a way to successfully launch your indie movie is ensure that it is in a built-in genre. Horror, you can go and find horror Facebook groups, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail because it's something we're doing a lot more of now. And there's people that are dedicated to consuming horror movies of all type. There's an avid indie community for that. So do you want to kind of talk about how your launch has a lot of default factors in it based on things like that, like the genre, like the type of story, and those different elements as well too, that you need to be thinking of as you're creating the story, or else you're just going to set yourself up for a much harder time?
Yeah, I see a lot of indie movies where they're kind of combining dramas or genres. So it's more like a thriller, sci-fi, romance, comedy. And the problem with that is it's the anytime you combine the genres, you have to hit more tropes. And in order to hit the tropes to make your audience happy, to cultivate that audience, it's just you're complicating your job. So just keep it simple. Put your movie in the genre and make sure it's specific to that genre so that you can give the fans a good time and they could recommend your movie. But I mean, you have to find your audience. And I think this is the biggest thing with indie filmmakers is they have no idea who's going to enjoy their movie. You know, they enjoy their movie. They like their movie. Their friends and family say they like it because they're related to them. But you really, off the street, you have to find the people that are interested in your movie. You have to find out where they hang out, whether that's Facebook, whether that's through Facebook ads, Google ads. How targetable are they? I think a lot of indie films just do not have a good audience. And if they do have an audience, they don't understand the audience enough to, hit the tropes that you need to hit. With horror, there's very specific tropes that you have to hit to give an enjoyable movie experience. Same thing with romance, especially look at the Christmas romance movies, the romance comedy movies. All that stuff is very genre specific. So there's a huge following for a lot of this stuff. But number one, you got to find out where these people live and what they want, as far as like a movie going experience, because people will turn your movie off very quickly if you start breaking tropes. We know this because we've done 8 movies before. The ones that had terrible watch throughs were the ones that we kind of broke the tropes of horror. We didn't have enough pop scares. We didn't have enough tension, and people just turned them off. And you can't have that with how the algorithm runs things. Tubi, you're getting paid all the way through, depending on how many ads people watch. So you have to make sure when someone turns on your movie, they watch it all the way through. Amazon penalizes you for having poor watch through rates, or, if they watch a couple minutes and click off, or they just don't, watch all the way through, Amazon's going to ding you. So you have to make sure you're putting out a really good product that is made for a specific audience, and you have to know where to find those people, and you have to know, what they're looking for in a movie.
Yep, that's exactly it. And I mean, it really is something where, again, you're setting yourself for a harder time. And let's talk about the hardest time you can ever set yourself up for. And this is something that I think it's very interesting because of like all the things that we do. The thing that is actually the most important for the overall success of the movie is typically the thing that will get the most flack, not only from our internal community, but also from like just other filmmakers, or like this is just like a hard concept for them to do. And what I'm talking to is the cover and the title of your film. If you take a look at our most recent covers, you will see a lot of floating cabins with blood on them. If you take a look at our movies, you're going to see a lot of the haunting ofs. And now if you see the full gambit of all of these, that's when people will be like, hey, I'm starting to notice a lot of this trend right here. But if they see the first one, they don't really notice it whatsoever. And the reason we do this is something we've stressed over multiple times in multiple episodes. You need to split test your cover, which is the most important thing, then your title, and also your blurb. But the cover and the title. When you look at all streaming services now, what are you looking at? You're looking at a cover and you're looking at a title. And if you can't capture people's attention with the title and the cover, you're done for. And the reason why I say this is so hard, and I've even experienced it myself, going through the early days, especially when I wanted The Haunting of the Morgan Estate to be called The Privileged, because I thought it was so cool and whatnot, is you get attached to this. As a creative, it's almost like naming your child. And then it's almost like naming your child, and the name of your child is something that's pretty generic or whatnot there. But here's the one thing. The people that typically give these feedbacks are people who will watch the movie no matter what. They're part of the community. They're part of the fans. They're the artists themselves. They are very dedicated to actually watching that whole thing. Someone who's never seen who you are, what you're about, what this movie is, They have absolutely no clue, and it's just based on that cover and that title. And you have to be ready to change it to whatever the algorithm says. And, again, we run Facebook ads that basically show us what the highest click-through rate is. And this is just something that is a non-negotiable. This is, no matter what people say or think. It's pretty funny because I'll always be like, well, you might not like the title, but we're going to go ahead and do it. So for instance, Shapeshifter was kind of the working title of our newest one. Now it's Force of Death. And it's still something where you kind of get used to calling it Shapeshifter and things like that. But Force of Death will do much better than Shapeshifter, purely factual based on the data. And this is something that you need to be able to embrace, and you have to embrace this mindset. This thing alone that we're doing is because the launch is the most important element of the movie. It's not the title, how you make it feel or how it sounds like that, or the cover. It's how will this affect your launch? And I think if you're not ready to do that, you really have to understand, are you just trying to be creative, which is fine, perfectly fine, or are you trying to actually make a business out of it? If you're trying to make a business, this is a no-brainer decision.
Yeah, look, I like to make movies. This is what I like to do. I could care less what we call this thing, because I know it's going to work, it's going to convert, and people are going to watch it. I am not my audience. We share similar traits, but at the end of the day, whatever's going to make you click on this, whatever blurb is going to make you read this, and whatever's going to make you click play, I'm 100% about it. I want to reach as many people as possible. And if you want to reach as many people as possible, this is how you do it. In our case, we have very specific branding with all of our titles, with all of our films. But just to give you an example, we split test the title of this movie, we split test the cover of this movie, and we split test the blurb of this movie, all independent of each other. They're all independent variables. And if you look at the title that won, so this movie is a homage to 80s, 70s, and 80s horror movies. So it's got campy, it's kind of fun. It has some blood and gore in it. It's a shapeshifter concept similar to The Thing. Look at the title, the cover, and the blurb that won. All of it screams 80s. So they all kind of work together. That title, Force of Death, is a very 80s horror movie title. It's very metal. The cover art, very metal 80s horror stuff you would find in like Blockbuster or the DVD bargain bin. That is the cover of that movie. And look at the blurb, very 80s sounding style blurb. We have kids, the college kids go to a vacation retreat cabin and something bad happens. So all that stuff was tested independent of each other. And we knew the audience so well because they were horror fans. And the horror fans we put in front of 150, 200, 300,000 people. They all said, I want to see a 70s and 80s horror homage to the shapeshifter concept. This cover looks like the best. This title sounds the best to me, and this blurb is the best. And we already know our audience, and we know what they like, and that's what we did. We gave it to them. So this movie, instead of calling it something like The Shapeshifter with just a very artsy cover, we have the ability to kind of push this snowball down the hill as opposed to pushing it up the hill. And it'll increase our visibility, it'll increase our reach. And we know that when I put this movie out on Amazon Prime, on Apple TV, and all these platforms, my target audience, which is 70s and 80s horror fans, are going to see this. They're going to know exactly what this movie is about and what they're going to expect, and they're going to click and they're going to watch it all the way through, because every step of the way, we made sure to hit everything that these fans, the 70s and 80s horror fans, wanted in the movie, from cover art all the way through the actual product itself.
That really is the case. I mean, again, you have to be ready to find that audience, and we hunt them down before it even happens. So the last thing I want to talk about on this episode, and then in the next episode, we'll basically talk about the daily actions of launch day, what you got to do to sound the alarm bells and really push the product out. But the last thing I want to talk about, which maybe we should have started off a little bit earlier, but again, as I was saying, got to set yourself up for success in the pre-production process. But another benefit from having this marketing mind that we're talking about, having the split tested cover, having the split tested trailer, having all of that stuff good, that's another thing. Your trailer, we'll talk about that a little bit before you start. The trailer super critical. And I also think, let's just actually talk about that right now. The trailer, I mean, I can tell now, between if we watch a trailer, we can, with a good idea, have a good sense of if your movie's good or not. If you can't make a good trailer out of your movie, you have issues. And it happens all the time. We've seen it before, but a good trailer is so critical. Do you want to just talk about trailers real quickly?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the bigger problems with indie films is that they cannot make a good trailer from their movie. And that is a huge problem for a couple of reasons. Number one, when someone goes to one of these platforms, the trailers autoplay. So they go to your page and the trailer autoplays and they watch it for 30 seconds. And it's either, hey, this looks good and this is interesting, it looks exciting, or this looks very low budget, it's indie, I'm out of here. It's a huge problem. So your conversion rate suffers if you have a trailer that doesn't grasp people's attention. And the second thing is, if you can't make a good trailer, what that tells me is you don't have enough action or kind of tension or kind of crazy events in your movie to actually cut a 1-minute trailer together. And if you can't do that, then I could already tell your movie is not going to be very good. But trailers are the highest converting ads that we have too. We just put a trailer on Facebook, put a trailer on Instagram. That drives the most traffic. It's almost 10 times cheaper than just a picture. So if you can't create a captive trailer, not only you're not going to be able to convert your audience, but you're also telling your audience, hey man, if I can't put together 1-minute montage essentially of my movie, tell you exactly the best parts and show you why you should watch this movie. If you can't do that, then, I mean, that's an art of filmmaking itself. If you can't take an 1.5-hour movie and condense it into a 1-minute action-packed trailer that has a lot of, tension, suspense, and it makes me want to watch your movie, then, I'm starting to question your ability to do that for an 1.5 hours and hold my attention. So you have to be very, very good at making trailers. And it takes a lot of practice, but you have to put a lot of effort into it. Don't just slap something together. And I really think that this is why distribution hates a lot of indie filmmakers, is because their trailers are just not good and you have to go and recut them. And if the distribution company has to go recut your trailer, it's going to cost you $5,000 to $10,000. So either find yourself someone who is very good at making trailers, or learn how to make trailers yourself. And we split test our trailers. We will make 50, 60 trailers. We will make as many trailers as we have to in order to find one that works really well. The good news is that we have gotten very good at making trailers because we've made so many of them, but we understand, how important trailers are, that I'm actually taking dialogue that I know I'm going to use in the trailer and I put it in the movie. So we have specific points where I'm like, all right, this is the lore scene. If you watch our trailer for Forest of Death, what is it? It's a giant Roger scene cut with action scenes from the movie. So you have narration over it from the movie, and you have action cuts and scares from the movie up until a minute. And that trailer is good. It's a very solid trailer. When we put it out on YouTube to all these sites, it's going to be very easy to share because everyone likes shapeshifters. It creates lore, it creates tension, it shows a little bit of action, and you almost want more from the trailer. If you're watching this trailer and you're like, oh, when does it end? This is boring me. You're going to be in a bad spot.
Yeah, really glad you mentioned that. I would say watch our trailers. Just go take a look at our trailers. That is what a good trailer looks like. And it comes from making so many of them, but it's exactly that. It is essentially a narration of what the story is going to be over all of the action beats. It's not very hard at all. You get used to it, and you have a good template for it, but yeah, you have to go ahead and work that. And if you don't, you're just going to put yourself at such a huge disadvantage. I'm glad you also mentioned distribution, because that's what I was going to lead into next as the last question for this episode. And really, for the distribution side of things, doing all of this stuff is going to make your distribution life so much easier. This is exactly what the distribution companies are looking for. Every time they work with us, they get a very clean product. They get a clean cover. They get a clean blurb. They get that trailer, and they see how marketable that already is. So having this mindset is not only going to be good and necessary for your launch, this is going to help out for you to get your distribution. And I think the last thing I want to kind of mention about distribution, while there is a big gambit of them, and I would say our experiences with them is generally positive in the sense that, we understand what they're providing, we understand what they're doing. I think a lot of filmmakers believe the distribution companies are there to market their movie, which really they're not. They're more or less a connector there. So do you want to kind of talk about how, as an indie filmmaker, do not think this distribution company is supposed to get you eyeballs. They're just supposed to get you on the platform.
Yeah, distribution has kind of changed. It used to be that they would market and promote your film, and then they realized, well, hey, we can charge a fee to just get you on all these platforms and kind of broker deals. And that's pretty much what they do now. The difference between the lower tier and the higher tier distribution is not marketing. It's not visibility. It's just getting on better platforms, your tier 1 and tier 2 platforms, because Amazon Prime, Apple TV, Vudu, all the lower ones in the moat, pretty much anyone can get on. If you have an aggregator, you can get on them. The harder stuff, which is Shudder, AMC, HBO, Showtime, those deals are a little bit harder, and that's where the bigger distribution companies come in. But even if they get you on those platforms, they're not promoting your movie. I mean, some will charge a marketing fee, but I've yet to see any real evidence that these companies are actually really promoting your film outside of just pitching it to different, streaming companies. So you are in charge of marketing. And I think that's definitely like a big myth that I see in this industry, where a lot of indie filmmakers are like, here, I'm going to use this distribution company because they're going to promote and market it. And that's really not the case. And even at the Hollywood level, I'm not even sure how that works out. But from my general understanding is there are marketing teams pushing behind that, and distribution's handled by outside company. So you are still responsible for your marketing. This is something that you have to do. And distribution companies want to make money because they have skin in the game. They're going to have 20% of the revenue that your movie is going to have. And they want stuff that's easy to market or is going to have organic traffic, because they're not going to market themselves. And that is a good trailer. That's a good cover. That's a good blurb. That's everything that we bring to the table. As opposed to, other filmmakers who want to kind of go with their gut or want to go with the title that, resonates with them. But it all comes back. Everything about this whole industry is about clicks, is about conversions. There's literally hundreds of movies being released each week. There is a ton of content all over the place. Movies hold up for a long time. So you're competing against 30 years of movies as well when people click on, the streaming platform at night. So you really have to stand out. You have to do your best. And if you fail to do this stuff, you're going to be in for a world of hurt when you're up there and you get buried in one of these platforms.
Nothing more scary than that first commission check you get as an indie filmmaker. God rest your soul on those, because, if you're not setting yourself up for success, and you're taking a look and you're getting 1, 2, 3 reviews, it can be very daunting out there. And that's why we wanted to have this episode, give you guys some tips, set you up for success. In our next episode, we're going to go ahead and hop into what it's like on that day of day 0. You're launching your movie, all hands on deck. What is it like? We'll tell you what that is next episode. Be sure to take a look at us online, follow our Discord channel, because that is a place to be. We make movies for our fans with our fans. So if you ever want to be part of our movie making process, all you got to do, download the Discord app and go ahead and click one of those many links we have floating out there. We'd love to see you. Until then, have a good one.